Hello, a very warm good evening to all of you and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to the third class in the series of Environment and Ecology. Now, till now, what are the areas that we have covered? Basically, if you look at the previous two sessions and the previous two classes, we have basically covered a host of different topics with the terms of explanations or be it the type of questions that you can expect from those topics. Today, we are going to slightly change our approach. In what sense of the way? Today, we are going to deal with more topics in the name of questions, so that you get an idea regarding what kind of questions can be asked, and thereby you also get a brief revision or a brief glimpse of the different topics that are important for this year's prelims examination. Rest assured, if you complete and if you thoroughly cover each and every topic that we have covered in this session and these series of lectures, that shall suffice for your revision purposes from the exam perspective. Okay? So without further ado, let us begin, and today we shall be looking into certain important conventions which have stayed in the news for the previous year, as well as few of the initiatives which have been launched globally, be it by different governments or be it by different world organizations. Okay? Now, before we begin, a sort of clarification is needed. Yesterday, there were a couple of mistakes which were observed during the lecture. First one was regarding the location of Dampa Reserve, whereby it was said that Boksa, Palamu and Dampa, they recorded 0 number of tiger population. So thereby, please be very clear, Dampa is situated in Mizoram and not in Manipur as was stated yesterday. Then, second, regarding the question that we discussed at the end of the class, at the very end of the class, regarding coral reefs. So there was certain confusion regarding that as well, if the options are correct or not. So thereby, the question, if we look at it again, so the first statement was that with reference to coral reefs and their ecosystems, consider the following statements, in which the first statement was they always represent a symbiotic relationship between zooxanthellae and coral polyps. So here the key word is always, because in most of the coastal waters, they do exhibit a symbiotic relationship, where zooxanthellae benefits from these coral polyps and coral polyps benefit from the algae. So, in the host of different types of relationships, that is amensalism, commensalism, mutualism, in all of those, it is a kind of symbiotic relationship which is exhibited by the coastal corals or corals in shallower waters. But, as we discussed yesterday, coral reefs are not only limited to shallower waters. Pretty often, they extend into the colder waters as far as off the coast of Norway. Also, certain times they are also found in the ocean beds. So in those cases, there is not a symbiotic relationship which is present between them, and certain times zooxanthellae is absent in those types of corals. So thereby, this particular aspect or this particular wording, that is always, that makes this statement as incorrect. And the second statement that we saw was regarding the pigment of coral polyps are the ones which give the corals their bright and colorful appearance. So again, here the pigment of coral polyps, that is an incorrect statement. Why? Because it is the zooxanthellae which in itself imparts different types of coloring pattern that you usually observe in these coral reefs. So again, this statement is rather incorrect. Then, these coral reefs are not only restricted to tropical regions but are also found in cold waters as far as 60 degrees north. That is a correct statement. Why? Example of it is Ross Reef off the coast of Norway, which is rather very important and has been rather in news for the past couple of years, because even those coral reefs are now feeling threatened due to global environmental change. So this is a correct option, and here we have to select the incorrect statements from the code, and that shall be 1 and 2 only. Okay, so those of you who were confused with this question, please mark it out that the answer shall be 1 and 2, and the reasoning for it, you now know it. Okay, now let us begin with today's topics regarding important conventions and certain other important initiatives launched across the world. So the first one we will notice is COP14 regarding Convention to Combat Desertification. Now, why is this important? This is important because it was held in India during the month of September in 2019. This COP meeting, or conference of parties rather, was held in India. Now, why is desertification so important for us? Because as a country which depends upon rainfall which occurs during very brief period of the year, India is more exposed to desertification than most of the countries around us. So that is why desertification and combating desertification immediately becomes the need of the hour. But then, from the prelims perspective, we need to look at few of the important aspects which were discussed during this meeting, and rather which emerged and again came into prominence due to this meeting. So the first issue was the Peace Forest Initiative. Now, what is this Peace Forest Initiative and who launched it? So Peace Forest Initiative was actually introduced by South Korea, right? Remember this, because you might face a question that Peace Forest Initiative was something which was initiated by India during COP14. So immediately you should know that that is a wrong answer. Then, what was the purpose of it? The purpose was actually quite humane. That is, through afforestation programs and rather reforestation programs, many conflict-prone areas and many areas which are perpetually and always under conflicted state due to certain stiff relations between neighboring countries, those areas can again be brought to economical as well as environmental use. So thereby, it would serve two purposes at the same time. First purpose, increase the green cover or increase the forest cover, thereby decreasing the land which degrades or decreasing the area of the land which is undergoing degeneration or desertification. And second purpose is that these peace forest areas, or the areas which have been forested under this initiative, they will then provide certain kind of economic incentives as well to the local populace, generating lots and lots of green jobs. Now, why is that important? Because whenever there is a conflict between two neighboring states, rather two neighboring countries, it is the people in the bordering areas who are always at loss. And it is those people who end up migrating to different places, leading to refugee crisis and migrant crisis all across the world. So as I said, Peace Forest Initiative launched by South Korea aims to solve these two purposes at the same time. Okay? Then, another important aspect was the actual discussion on the fact that how does desertification take place? And there were different types of arguments which were floated. And this is not those arguments which have been floated in this meeting. This is a kind of debate which has been going on for quite a long period of time. And thereby, in this meeting, it was actually accepted by all the parties that it is rather the anthropogenic effect or the human impact on the land itself, which certain times leads to degradation as well as increase in desertified areas. How is it so? So why do we need to know this reason? Because again, you can expect multiple statement like questions whereby you are asked what are the reasons which can contribute to increasing desertified areas. So here what you have to notice is that, and what you have to extract out of here is that most of the problems or most of the desertified areas are human induced or are anthropogenic in nature. Because let's see, for example, what is happening in the states that are in the northwestern part of the country. That is, the states of Punjab, Haryana, as well as in central India, if you will consider, the western part of Madhya Pradesh and parts of Rajasthan. There, the soil fertility is decreasing day by day. And the traditional method of flood irrigation which is followed, it is making the soil more and more saline because more salts now come to the surface. Now, what will happen as a result of it? Sooner or later, the rains will vary. Because we know that monsoon rains, they are not always going to be consistent. They either increase or decrease in their quantity. Now, immediately when the rains will decrease, the land will completely become unproductive. And thereby, there lies the seed to increasing desertified areas. Because once the land starts degrading, not only the fertility, but the flora, fauna which are present in that soil, in that land, that also desert that area, or they leave that area for someplace else. And due to that, the whole area starts becoming prone to erosional purposes and erosional activities, whether it be in the form of flash floods or splash erosion that is observed, or in certain cases, activities like sheet erosion, which is observed due to lack of vegetation, and thereby even the wind starts playing its effect, and what you have as a result is a large ever-encompassing desert. So thereby, it was in this meeting that human-induced desertification or human-induced degradation was identified as one of the biggest causes of increasing non-productive lands all across the world. Okay? Then, in this meeting, another important activity which happened was the launching of Drought Toolbox. Now, what is Drought Toolbox? So, Drought Toolbox is that kind of portal which was developed, which would give the people an idea regarding what kind of parameters are present, be it from moisture availability to be it to soil fertility, everything that you need to know in order to know whether your land is in a perfect condition or it is close to being degraded. That information, the medium through which it is transmitted to the people at large, that was named as Drought Toolbox. So what you have to remember here? Just remember that Drought Toolbox was launched in the COP meeting which happened in India for UNCCD, that is there. Okay? Then, public-private partnership was again incentivized and again was sought to be one of the best available methods in order to bring large areas of land under productive use. Because again, public-private partnership is one of those areas which have constantly been in debate. So hereby, examples of Kenya were posed where large swaths of population or large number of population were benefited in a water sharing or drinking water program which was run by public-private partnership, and thereby it ensured that the last mile delivery of services happened while ensuring that there was benefit to all the parties concerned. So that is why public-private partnership was again one of the major key takeaways from this conference of parties which was held in India. Okay, so these four major takeaways you have to remember, you have to understand, because you can get confused when it is framed in the form of a question. Let us take a look at certain types of questions which can be framed. With reference to UNCCD, which of the following statements is or are correct? First, India for the first time hosted the COP of UNCCD in 2019. That is true. The 14th COP saw the launch of the Drought Toolbox. Again, very true. Right? Then, with reference to UNCCD COP 14, consider the following statements. So the first statement, UNCCD is the sole legally binding international agreement linking environment and development to sustainable land management. So that is true, and here sustainable land management, keep that in mind, because again this is a key word that can be very important. Then, during this conference, African countries launched the Peace Forest Initiative. So this will be incorrect. Why? Because it was launched by South Korea. Then, during this conference, the initiative of sustainability, stability and security, the 3S, mark these 3S again as they are important, was launched to address the migration driven by land degradation. That is, people tend to migrate from their original areas to some other areas because the land which used to feed them, that land is no longer profitable, that land is no longer providing enough. So that is why it generally drives lots and lots of people away from their homeland into some other areas. So again, this is a correct statement. So what we have to do, we have to mark the correct statements that are there, and that will be 1 and 3. Again, in this question, if you will look, you can use the same method of elimination to reach your answer if you knew that African countries have not launched the Drought Toolbox that is there. Okay? Then, with reference to Great Green Wall, consider the following statements. First, it was launched to combat desertification by the African Union. That is true. Then, it is supported internationally by World Meteorological Organization. Not very true. Now, what is Great Green Wall Initiative? Now, as you can see from the figure here, Great Green Wall Initiative is an initiative launched by different African countries to construct one of the largest living landscapes all over the world. Once it gets completed, it will have an area spanning or the length spanning approximately around 8,000 kilometers. So that is why once this happens, or once this Great Green Wall is constructed, what will be the result of it? The Sahara Desert, that is always thought to be a danger, that the Sahara Desert is expanding in all different areas, that expansion can be stopped prematurely. Secondly, there can be lots and lots of economic benefits which can accrue from this green wall constructed across the whole breadth of this continent. And they will also generate lots and lots of jobs. So it ensures an ever-encompassing and an overall improvement in the living conditions as well as in the societal structure that shall be prevailing in those countries. So thereby, till now, billions of dollars have been raised and more than around 15 to 20 countries are already involved in this initiative. So that is why remember what Great Green Wall Initiative is and where it is being launched and what is it. Okay? So it is going to be a largest living structure which is going to be constructed, or rather which is going to be encouraged to grow across the breadth of the continent to stop the further spread of desertification, or to further arrest the land from being degraded even further. Okay? Then, after that, we come to the bond challenge. Now, what is important from bond challenge? So, there are two things which are important. First is the purpose of bond challenge. What is the purpose behind it? Right? And the second is the parties who were involved or who are responsible for this bond challenge to come into force. So first of all, what is the purpose behind it? The basic purpose or the major reason for this bond challenge is again to arrest the spreading of degraded land, and rather to turn it to a positive aspect. This challenge actually strives to bring more amount of degraded land under productive use, again with a larger view to prevent desertification, to prevent land degradation, and to bring more productive and peaceful use that you can generate out of the land. So that is what bond challenge is. And here keep in mind that it was actually government of Germany and IUCN which were at the helm when this challenge was launched. Okay, so bond challenge is very important this year. You can always expect a direct kind of question regarding what bond challenge is, and there you can expect a statement that which are the parties which launched it. So be very careful that it is government of Germany and IUCN and not any other organization like UNEP or WMO that is responsible. Okay, then after that we come to iterative evolution. Now, what is iterative evolution? Or when do we say that an iterative kind of evolution has taken place? So this is in news because there is an atoll in Indian Ocean where people have found a certain variety of bird which is now only a land bird, which does not fly anymore. So it is one of those avian species which does not fly but used to fly earlier. So there, and from that concept comes the terminology iterative evolution. The bird in question is rather Aldabra rail. Okay? Now, the previous and ancient fossil records of this kind of bird, of different types of rail species that were there, they were the ones who used to fly to larger distances and fly across larger areas. But then this bird actually resides in a small island where there are not many top predators. Remember, yesterday we discussed that if there is a top predator, then the whole species and the whole biodiversity rather evolves in a completely different manner and a completely different way. Now, here it was discovered that there was an evolution which happened, whereby certain traits of the original species were not retained by this species. And that is what you refer to as an iterative evolution, whereby evolution does happen. And evolution happens from the same ancestral species. But then there is a general variation depending upon the use of the different organs. What do we mean here? So basically, as I said, that since there were lack of predators on this particular island, on this particular spot, so thereby these birds no longer had the need to fly away from the ground. They could now pick up the small worms and insects actually hopping on the ground itself. So that is why slowly and steadily their flight or the feathers that in a way facilitate the flight, those feathers, they started becoming haywire, as well as the bone structure and the muscles which are present in the bird, that also weakened considerably. So now what you have? Now you have a flightless bird, like you had the case with the dodo, which eventually became extinct. So the same case is happening with this bird as well, that it has evolved to be a flightless species of bird and is rather restricted to that small island very close to Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. So if this island were to drown, as it did happen long time back, if this island were to drown again, so we are at a loss, or we are at a danger of losing these species for a permanent period of time and for perpetuity. Okay, so that is what iterative evolution is actually about. Okay, now the question, the term iterative evolution, recently seen in the news, can be best described as what? So the first statement, the evolution of similar or parallel structures from the same ancestor but at different places at the same time. Does it happen at the same time? What does the first statement tell us? First statement is indicating a kind of evolution where simultaneously different subgenes or different subspecies, they evolve or they come to life. So that is not what iterative evolution is about. Then, the repeated evolution of similar or parallel structures from the same ancestor but at different times in history. So this will be the correct statement. Okay? Look at the third statement. The concept of an ecosystem reviving itself after destruction. What is this? It is definitely not iterative evolution. But what is this concept indicative of or significant of? This statement rather tells you about the concept of primary and secondary succession. So let us quickly understand what do we mean by primary and secondary succession. Because even though it comes under the concept of the static portion of environment, but again is very important from civil services perspective because of the different types of forest fires which have been witnessed all across the globe. So we get two terminologies, that is primary and secondary succession. What are those? So as the name goes and as the name in itself indicates, whenever there is creation of a new kind of landform, the first kind of species or the first kind of living beings, be it flora, be it fauna, who inhabit that place, they are referred to as the primary successors or the primary inhabitants. Then, after some time, as is the case with the whole of the planet, those landforms might get destructed due to, let's say, a fresh volcanic eruption leading to creation of a newer rock, or, as I said, due to the ever-raging and spreading forest fires which are rather prevalent nowadays all across different parts of the world. So thereby, when that landscape or landform is again refreshed or is refurbished or is recreated so that new species they come and inhabit that, so that kind of succession is what you refer to as the secondary succession. And please be mindful of one fact here, that be it primary succession, be it the secondary succession, the flora as well as fauna, they both show the indications of both, that is primary as well as secondary. That is, certain kinds of plants, they are very good at growing at new places where there has never been life before. And certain kinds of plants, they germinate whenever you have a forest fire destroying the soil cover or destroying the vegetation above. Then from those ashes, certain kinds of plants, they germinate, which can be referred to as secondary successors. Okay? So that is the concept of primary and secondary succession. Then, after that, we come to the big event which happened, which is generally considered very, very important, but then you don't expect a direct question from this, that where is it, or where is it that COP happened, or where did this meeting happen? No. Rather, you expect certain derived or derivative kind of questions. So, what is this basically about? This is a conference of party meeting which is according to the UNFCCC, right? And it was held in Madrid under the presidentship of Chile. The meeting could not happen in Chile because there were certain anti-government protests which were going on at that point of time. So Spain took the responsibility of holding and conducting this meeting thereby. So that is why you have the Conference of Parties meeting at Madrid, which is important. Now, what else is important from this point? One thing is that it was a COP of UNFCCC, right? And along with it, there was also a meeting which was regarding the parties for Kyoto Protocol as well as the parties for Paris Agreement. Now, why was this meeting so important and rather had a very important position? That is because after the Paris Agreement and after the Paris deal, to arrest the temperature change or the rise of temperature in the global atmospheric condition, there was rather an intention which was shown by different countries, but there was no definite rule book which was established. So this COP25 at Madrid, that is very famously known as the meeting which established the rule book for the Paris Agreement. And given the global sort of indemnation or rather sort of indifference which was shown to the Paris Agreement, the holding of this meeting became much more important. And since it was held under the presidency of Chile, which has a very long coastline and rather a fragile coastline, which is again threatened by climate change, threatened by global warming, as well as threatened by the very act of eutrophication, damaging the species close in the coastal areas. So that is why sea and looking at the sustainability and management of seawater as well as the blue environment around us, this meeting was also referred to as the Blue COP. This is very, very important. This meeting at Madrid was referred to as the Blue COP. Okay? Because here actionable framework was being discussed upon regarding what can be done to preserve the actual water resources that we have all around us. Here, another important fact which happened or another important event which happened was establishment of Santiago Network for the framework as part of what we say as WIM or Warsaw International Mechanism. Now, what is this Warsaw International Mechanism? This is a mechanism regarding loss and damages. Right? Which was established or which was thought about and deliberated in considerable detail when COP19 happened in Warsaw. So at that point of time, the very concept of loss and damages was debated for a long period of time. But then no actionable networking or no actionable framework was formed for that. Now, loss and damages, what is it? It is basically setting apart or setting up of the kind of losses that have been incurred or that have been committed to the global environmental structure and biodiversity by the developed nations already. So the loss and damages aspect is basically about adapting to it and thereby helping the poorer countries and the developing countries to adapt to how the climate is changing and provide certain technologies in order to face that different vagaries that climate has to throw at them, or climate change rather has to throw at them. So that is what was Warsaw International Mechanism. So even WIM is important, but more important than that is the Santiago network, because now you have a very solid groundwork which has been done regarding what is it and how is it that losses and damages shall be accounted for. Okay? Then, type of question. With reference to COP25 of UNFCCC, consider the following statements. First, this COP was also referred to as Green COP because of its focus on resilient agriculture. So, be very careful of these kind of statements which look very, very right, but then there are certain keywords which you have to look into. Then, it also adopted the Chile-Madrid time for action document. Again, this is a correct statement. And the third statement is, it also established the Santiago network. We studied about Santiago network, so 2 and 3 will be correct. Here again, if you look at the options, if you know that first statement is incorrect, you can basically end up eliminating and reaching your correct answer even if you do not know the rest of the couple of statements. So always try and practice these sort of questions. I'll keep on reiterating that time and time again. Now, after that, we move on to omega block. Now, what is omega block? And why it is rather said as omega block? So, omega block, if you look at the shape that you see on your screen, here you will see the shape that is pointed out, that is in the form of the letter omega. Now, what is omega block? This is a kind of blockage which is formed across the global level, whereby there is a lack of intermixing of air from different parts. So what are these? This line that you see, what are these? These are nothing but jet streams. The jet streams having a rather wavy or a rather curved path around different places of the earth. And where are these jet streams formed? These jet streams typically are formed wherever in upper air atmosphere you have a temperature difference or a zone of transition which is available in different air masses. So when you have a jet stream which is wavy and which is fixated at one point, does not move from that point. So thereby, no further mixing of air from either sides is going to happen. So in case there is a high pressure built up in any particular area, now what are the climatic conditions we associate with high pressure? The climatic conditions that we generally end up associating is clear sky as well as a general lack of rain. Right? If the high pressure is formed over the land areas, then there is a general lack of rainfall which is observed in those areas. Now, what does this lead to, or what does this fixated jet stream pattern lead to? When there will not be any intermixing of air between different areas, so if an area remains hot, or if an area is receiving greater amount of insulation, as a result the temperature is increasing, the temperature is going to keep on increasing. there won't be any kind of cold advection or there won't be any kind of cold wind coming from any particular region, thereby lessening the temperature in that area. And due to this, you have different European countries like the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands as well as countries like Germany who have witnessed one of the highest temperatures ever recorded. And again, that was because of the blockage formed by these jet streams. Now, on a related concept, the jet streams, they tend to waver and they tend to form a wave-like pattern all across the globe. So, in such a conditionality or in such a condition, what is this kind of wave which is generated called as? It is generally what you refer to as the Rossby wave. So Rossby wave is also important, and it is that kind of wave that generally generates the omega pattern that you see prevailing all across the globe right now. And generally this omega block that you will observe, it will have alternate areas of low, high and low pressure. So what happens when there is a high pressure or an anticyclonic condition? Wind tends to originate and move out of that area, right? Whereas in a low pressure, wind tends to come in from all those areas. But if this movement of wind is stopped, then the temperature becomes very sultry and unbearable, and that is why you have the omega block leading to such high temperatures in maximum countries in Europe and also in certain parts of North America as well. This property was observed, and this property is being observed continuously for the past few years now. Okay? Now, the question, which one of the following statements best illustrates the term omega block recently seen in news? So from here you will be expecting these kind of questions itself, that what does this terminology actually mean? So the first, it is essential vitamin present in some food. Immediately when you hear vitamin, incorrect. It refers to the cause of recent heat waves observed in many European nations. That shall be the correct answer for this, because the heat wave could not be dissipated for a long period of time because there was no intermixing of wind. Okay? Then, after that, we come to the Conference of Parties which was held with regards to Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. Now, these have happened this year. So, it is our prerogative to read about it, that what they are basically about. Okay? What Basel Convention is about, what Rotterdam Convention is about, and what Stockholm Convention is basically about. So, Basel Convention, which is actually the oldest of all these three, this is about, or this is a convention which deals with the hazardous wastes which are generated, be it in the form of fly ash that you get, or the ash that is generated out of incinerators, or other waste which are referred to as the household waste. So, Basel Convention deals with those kind of wastes which are generated. Okay? Then, Rotterdam Convention. Rotterdam Convention involves PIC for certain chemical hazardous or certain pesticides that are there. So, what is PIC? PIC is basically prior informed consent. Right? So, it is a legally binding agreement which is signed between different countries so that the other country is aware about the waste which is being transported or which is being moved across the national boundaries. Why this Rotterdam Convention is so important? Because earlier what used to happen is that different developed countries that were there, they used to very easily take out their goods or take out the hazardous pesticides and chemical waste that they generated, and they used to dump it in the developing or underdeveloped countries without any accountability. So it is after that, under the aegis of both FAO and UNEP, or United Nations Environment Program and Food and Agriculture Organization, that Rotterdam Convention was reached at, and thereafter accountability was fixed that unless and until you have this legally binding prior informed consent, you cannot move the goods along transnational boundaries that are there. Okay, so with regards to Rotterdam Convention, this is very important this time that both FAO and UNEP are at the helm of this convention, who ensure the functioning and smooth running of this convention. Okay, then after that we have the Stockholm Convention. Now, what is Stockholm Convention and what does it deal with? So Stockholm Convention, primarily it deals with POPs, or what is referred to as the persistent organic pollutants. Now, what are persistent organic pollutants? These are basically those kind of chemicals which they actually break down into many small parts, and thereby they are dispersed in the whole of the food chain, and they keep on biomagnifying as well as bioaccumulation process is observed, and whereby they eventually get dissolved into the tissue, or they remain present in the tissue of different organisms, and after that bioaccumulation takes place, and it is very harmful, particularly for the young ones as well as for the elderly. So in order to deal with the persistent organic pollutants, you have the Stockholm Convention, which was actually enacted. Now, here you will come across the term quite often, that is the dirty dozen. And lots of questions you will come across that the dirty dozen actually relates to what? So dirty dozen was the name given to 12 set of different chemicals or 12 set of different compounds which could be counted as POPs and which were very dangerous and very harmful to the general populace at large. Even though now the list has been further expanded and different more chemicals have been included, but the name dirty dozen sticks and the name dirty dozen remains. So again, be very watchful whenever you come across the term dirty dozen, immediately know you are talking about the Stockholm Convention. Now, out of all of these, it is the persistent organic pollutants which end up directly getting into our food chain. The rest of them that are there, they do destroy our ecosystem around us, and they have the actual capacity to cause hazard all around us. But then it is the persistent organic pollutants which have a direct relation with us, which tend to impact us very directly. So be mindful of that what POPs are and how harmful they are. Okay? Then consider the following statements regarding the POPs. First, Rotterdam Convention is related to reduction or elimination of the production, use and or release of the 12 POPs. No, it is the Stockholm Convention. Then they remain intact for long periods in the environment, which is true. Then they accumulate in the fatty tissues of living organisms except humans. Why would the humans not be present? So whenever you get such kind of confusing arguments or confusing statements, apply your logic. that if all the living organisms are going to suffer from it, then what sort of immunity or what sort of special protection do we humans possess? Absolutely zilch or nothing. So that is why this is incorrect. They end up accumulating in the tissues of all different kinds of living organisms. Okay? Its concentration decreases as it gets transferred to a higher level in the food chain. Again, why will the concentration keep on decreasing? As you move up higher into the food chain, slowly and steadily after a point, after reaching its peak, then the concentration will keep on increasing thereby. Because it ends up affecting the whole host of species, the whole host of food web that you find around in an ecosystem. So that is why this statement will also be incorrect. Now, which of the following statements given here are incorrect? Right? So here you have to find out the incorrect statement. As I said, be very mindful of what you have to find out, a correct or an incorrect statement. So here it will be D, that is 1, 3 and 4. Then consider the following pairs regarding different international conventions or protocols and the associated matters that are there. So first is the Nagoya Protocol. Now, what is Nagoya Protocol related to? Nagoya Protocol is related to equal access and benefit sharing that accrues from any ecosystem or from any genetics that are there. So, it is in Nagoya Protocol that you also have the HE targets. Right? So, here it is said, Nagoya Protocol is for biosafety. Absolutely not. Then you have Cartagena Protocol. Now Cartagena Protocol is related to what? Cartagena Protocol is related to CBD and thereafter it is also related to biosafety. So again, this is an incorrect mapping. And as we discussed in the first class, not only is it important to know which options are right, it is equally important to know why such certain option or why such and such option is actually wrong. Okay? So, know why these two are not matched. Then, Stockholm Convention, discussed about it. Persistent organic pollutants, so this will be correct. Then Rotterdam Convention, it is regarding prior informed consent procedure, which is rather a legally binding agreement that you come across between different areas, between different countries. So that will be also correct. Now, here we have to find out which are correctly matched, and that shall be B, that is 3 and 4 only. Okay? Then, after that, we come at Basal Ban. Now, why is Basal Ban important this year? Because recently, Croatia also ratified it and became the 97th country to join the host of countries which have banned the transnational movement of hazardous goods. Why? Because these hazardous goods, when they are transported from or when they are shipped from developed to developing countries, it leads to what? It leads to land degradation. How? How does it lead to land degradation? That is because many of the times the different solid wastes that we very freely end up throwing outside in the environment, outside in the soil, those solid wastes also end up secreting certain types of chemicals, certain kinds of chemical effluents which degrade the soil fertility, which rather alter the structure of different compounds present in the soil and make it unfit for any kind of green cover or for productive use. So that is why in order to prevent from this, or in order to prevent this from happening, you have the Basal Ban which was enacted for preventing the transnational movement of these goods. And mind you, lots and lots of countries have done this for the decades of 60s, 70s, and also in the earlier part of 80s with quite a good degree of impunity, because there was no watchdog to look after them, and they rather termed the developing and the underdeveloped countries as the dump yards of the world. But still, the point here to mark is that countries like United States and also India, they have still not ratified it. So keep that in mind. US, India, and these countries, they have still not ratified the Basal Ban that is there. Okay? The type of question. The Basal Ban amendment was in the news recently. It is related to which of the following issues? So here, of the different options that you have, the answer shall be D, that is export of hazardous waste. And mind you, many of the times here, Indian economy is also interlinked to it. How? Because in certain developing countries, like you have India, like you have country like Bangladesh, in these countries, many of the times, we actually import certain hazardous waste from developed countries and thereby end up getting and extracting scrap out of it and selling it back again or recycling it back again. So due to this action and due to this economic cycle that developing countries depend upon, there are multiple different effects on the local climate as well as on the health of the people who are associated with it. And one of the most common kind of disease that people contract out of it is asbestos poisoning. Because most of the heavy metal wastes or heavy wastes that are there, they are rather constituted out of asbestos. So that is something which is also damaging economically, and rather that is why many countries still they keep on importing certain waste products from developed countries, from OECD countries, so that they keep their own small scale level economy running. Okay, so keep those aspects in mind. Then after that we have C40. So first of all, let us look at the question that can be framed from this. Then from this question we shall get an idea about what C40 is actually about. So with reference to C40, consider the following statements. The first statement is, it focuses on tackling climate change and driving urban action that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So again, that will be true, right? Second, there are no Indian cities in the list of C40 as India is yet to ratify it. This is incorrect. Why? Because rather there are 6 Indian cities. Which are these 6 Indian cities? These 6 are the 4 metro cities that you have, that is Delhi, NCR. Okay, when we are talking about Delhi, we are talking about the whole of the National Capital Territory or National Capital Region that is there. Then you have Kolkata, Chennai, Mumbai, and other than that you have the 2 cities of Bangalore or Bengaluru, as well as you have Jaipur. So it is not true that you have no Indian city in it. You have rather 6 Indian cities which are involved in it. Okay. Then it is a joint initiative of UNFCCC and the World Bank. Absolutely incorrect. So here we have to find out which of the following statements are incorrect, and the answer shall be 1 and 3 only. Now C40 is rather an important movement of the major mega cities of the world, in order to tackle certain very basic issues that our cities are facing nowadays. And when I'm talking about issues, I'm not talking about issues regarding jobs or issue regarding economy. I'm talking about issues regarding the basic sustenance of these big cities. So that is why under C40, you have a host of different kinds of agreements, like you have Clean City Air Program, then you have Sustainable Food Program that is being launched, because due to the infrastructure mop-up that is generally observed in the cities, and generally the mega cities are nothing but a form of a concrete jungle that is being erected all around. So everywhere around the world, there has been a noticeable increase in air pollution as well as a decrease in the food production that you can expect from these cities. The food production has rather been outsourced to the nearby areas. So that is not sustainable in the long run, because as the city limit keeps on increasing, the areas which are known to produce food, those areas and those floodplains start getting constricted. Take the case of Delhi NCR. As the boundaries of the national capital region is increasing, and it is increasing considerably in all the different directions. So those areas which earlier specialized in food production or agrarian economy, they are rather diverting their kind of products, and those lands are being put to some other use. Whether in certain cases, like in the case of Delhi NCR, you will see that the peripheral areas are used for nothing but dumping of waste. Again, what does that lead to? Land degradation, eventually leading to desertification. So in order to arrest that, you need to have a proper sustainable planned network of these cities in order to share the best practices, in order to share their technical experience, as well as in order to frame a pathway for sustainable development in those cities. Okay, so under this C40, please understand one thing is very important, that is knowledge sharing. Okay, it might seem pretty mundane and unimportant to say why knowledge sharing is important, but then sharing of best practices oftentimes is mentioned as an option, and if you go through the previous 20 years of UPSC previous year questions for prelims, you will find such terms used in such a confusing manner that we oftentimes mark it as incorrect. So please keep that in mind, that knowledge sharing and sharing of best practices as well as development of a framework for sustainable food production, clean air program, as well as an overall sustainable business architecture is all under the ambit of C40. It is not as if the business side of these cities shall be completely ignored and we are going to turn the cities into greenhouses. No, even business and how to actually shape the businesses in these big cities, that is also an important agenda of C40. Okay, then after that we have the Wasteland Atlas. Now again, Wasteland Atlas was released by the government previous year, but it still remains important. Why? Let us look at the question. With reference to Wasteland Atlas 2019, which of the following statements are incorrect? Right? So, Wasteland Atlas is released by the Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation annually. No. It is rather released by Ministry of Rural Development that is there. It is not released by Ministry of Water Resources. Okay? And even under Ministry of Rural Development, it is the Department of Land Resources which generates the Wasteland Atlas, because be very clear why it is that we need to map out the wasteland. Primarily because we need to have an idea about what wasteland or what percentage of the area in a particular region, in a particular state, in a particular city is not in productive use. So hence you have Department of Land Resources under Ministry of Rural Development, which is responsible for this. Then, according to this atlas, the majority of wasteland has been changed into the croplands that are there. That is in fact true. We'll look at that which states they are actually observing great amount of conversion of wasteland into croplands. Then, majority of the wastelands have undergone positive changes in the southern states. So, this is incorrect. Okay? Why? Because majority of the changes that you see are in the colloquially used term which was used earlier by the Planning Commission, that is the Bimaru states that were there. That is, in the states of, if you will notice, in the states of Bihar, then you have UP, then you have Madhya Pradesh, then you have Rajasthan. In these areas, majority of wastelands which were not being put to use for a considerable period of time, they have been converted into croplands, or they have been brought under irrigation and agricultural use. So that is why you will see these are not the southern states. So if you look at this, then the first statement was incorrect, second was correct, and the third was incorrect, and we have to choose the incorrect options. So it will be C, that is 1 and 3 only. Now, why am I picking these topics and picking up the questions from that? So that you get an idea and you don't need to go into depth and read about what Wasteland Atlas is. Derive all the information through these questions. That will suffice for the revision purpose. Don't go searching for what Wasteland Atlas is, what kind of reports are generated, because it is a thick report and frankly speaking, you don't have the time before the prelims examination. So in this, keep that in mind that it is released by Ministry of Rural Development. Okay? Ministry is very important. Then, after that, we have the Earth Hour. So, which of the following is correct regarding the Earth Hour? First, it is a global event organized by WWF for Nature, World Wildlife Fund for Nature. So, this is a correct statement. Then, it is an initiative which was started as a commitment made by the parties at the UNFCCC meet in Rio in 1992. So, whenever coming across a statement like this, please be careful that any such commitment, had it been made under UNFCCC, it would have had generally a sort of conference of parties which would have been held. There would have been a general convening of different member nations in order to ensure the mapping of such programs. If you have not heard about such news, that means this is incorrect. Okay, so be very careful about what are or what is the statement given in the option. So here it will be 1 only. Now, when is it that Earth Hour was actually initiated and launched? And where was it launched? It was actually launched in Sydney in Australia. Right? And in the previous decade itself, during the year of 2007 was when the idea of it came to an inception, and thereby it was followed thereby so as to prove and so as to in a way show the sensitivity that we have for the nature around us. How is it observed? It is basically observed with the help of or by a symbolic switching off of all the electrical appliances and all the lights around yourself. Okay, so Earth Hour is not by UNFCCC, and it was rather launched in Australia in Sydney and is organized by WWF. Okay? Then, in the context of climate change science, which of the following statements correctly describes the term LOHA-FEX? LOHA-FEX. Now, what does this terminology tell you about? If you do not understand what the whole terminology or what the full form is, LOHA is rather a Hindi terminology used for iron. So whatever it would be, something would do with regards to iron. Something has to do with iron. Now let us go through the statement. First, it was an experiment aimed at increasing carbon dioxide sequestration through ocean iron fertilization as part of studies on global warming mitigation. A long statement that is there, but a correct statement nonetheless. So, what is this LOHA-FEX? And what is this actually about increasing carbon dioxide sequestration through iron fertilization? What do we mean and what do we generate when we have iron fertilization observed in oceanic waters? So understand the process. First of all, be very clear what is carbon dioxide sequestration. That is, in a layman's term, if you put it, it is basically the absorption of atmospheric carbon dioxide, or rather the removal of atmospheric carbon dioxide into different parts of the Earth's surface or the water bodies that are there, thereby decreasing the carbon dioxide content which is present in the form of greenhouse gas in atmosphere. That is what you generally refer to as sequestration. Sequestration is done via various means. Most of the times, the ideal way to sequester carbon dioxide is by collecting the carbon dioxide and the excessive amount of carbon dioxide present around you and then injecting it into the Earth's surface and leaving it beside or beneath a layer of non-permeable or a semi-permeable kind of rock. So, wherever there is a kind of a semi-permeable rock bed, there are pipelines which are dug through which carbon dioxide is injected into it. And there, carbon dioxide is trapped, and when it is trapped for a long period of time, it turns into a resource thereby. So here you will also see that many of the times carbon dioxide is sequestered under certain ice caps, sometimes in certain unused or rather certain mines which have already been exploited to the fullest and which are no longer in use. So in those, carbon dioxide is filled in great amount, and thereby after some time you get an idea or you get a chance to regenerate gas which can be used for productive purposes, because that gas will have traces of hydrocarbons in it. Okay, so that is what the whole process of carbon sequestration is all about. Now, what is this about ocean iron fertilization? And how is it that it will help in global warming mitigation? So, what is done basically, if you look at the oceanic landscape, so in ocean waters, initially itself, since the time the earth was being formed, iron was present in its elemental form. And this elemental form of iron is very important for growth of phytoplanktons. Right? Now, the population of phytoplankton is very important and utmost important when it comes to sustaining the overall food web around the whole ecosystem of oceanic or aquatic waters, because they form the base of the food chain. It is these phytoplanktons which are, or upon which the fishes or larger animals are dependent upon, and in a way the absence of phytoplanktons can have disastrous consequences in all the species, starting and ranging from the fish to the great big blue whale itself. So that is one purpose of these phytoplanktons. What is the second purpose? The term phyto indicates they are plant species. So any plant species that is there, in the presence of sunlight, they take in carbon dioxide and give out what? Oxygen. So that is, and due to this process, different phytoplanktons, if their population increases in the oceanic waters, thereby it will lead to more consumption of carbon dioxide and more regeneration of oxygen, making the aquatic ecosystem much more sustainable and much more healthier. Mind you, we have also read about ocean deoxygenation and how disastrous and harmful it can be. So thereby understand the term ocean iron fertilization. It is nothing but injecting certain free elemental iron particles in the oceanic water so as to encourage the growth and further development of phytoplanktons in those waters. Okay? Then, after that, we come to a terminology that is plastic crust. Again, very important this year. You will not expect a sort of mains-like question, but if a question has to be asked from here, it will be asked from the prelims perspective. So that is why it is very important. Look at the type of question which can be framed. The term plastic crust, recently seen in the news, refers to, first, new adhesive material for the aircrafts. The figure itself defies this logic, so it is incorrect. Newly discovered oceanic plate in the Indian Ocean. Again, incorrect. And here you will see, third is new kind of plastic pollution, which is rather the correct answer. Now, what is this plastic crust about? So, recently, off the coast of Africa, in the island of Madeira, which is under the governance of Portugal. So here, in the different volcanic rocks, there is found to be, or there has been, presence of plastics which have been discovered. And in these rocks, close to a proportion of near 9.8% is the total composition of plastics in these rocks. Now, how did these plastics come here? That is something still upon which research is going upon. But the dangerous aspect here is that these are volcanic rocks. That is, they have been generated from inside the earth. So think about the scale of pollution if plastic is actually present even in the lava which outcomes. So this plastic is considerably different from other kind of plastic pollution that you see in the rocks. What is the other kind of plastic pollution that you observe in the rocks? And what kind of rocks are most susceptible to plastic pollution? So if you apply the logic, what kind of rock will be susceptible to plastic pollution? There can be only one kind of rock. The kind of rock which is formed by hardening and accumulation of different kinds of constituents, different kinds of materials that are thereby. That rock is the sedimentary rock. So what happens? Many a times plastic is infused in the sediments in the form of land pollution that we see around ourselves. And thereby, when the hardening of that structure takes place and when that structure gets converted into rock-like formation, that is the sedimentary rock formation, there generally we observe plastic deposits to have happened. And there we have seen earlier as well plastics to be present in some form or the other in those rocks. But this is the first time where a volcanic rock has also indicated formation of plastics. And hence the term plastic crust, that is a crust composed of plastic. Now, how is this dangerous? Apart from the obvious reasons. So, this is dangerous because there are species of snails, right, who feed on these rocks, who actually depend upon the salts which are present in these rocks. Mind you, there are many different categories of animals, from ibex to certain times you have certain marine animals also, who are totally dependent upon the salt which is secreted by the rock in order for their nutrient cycle to be balanced. So those animals who are dependent upon those rocks, who generally lick the rocks to get the salts out of it, those animals are at danger. So you have different snails who are ingesting this plastic. If snails are affected, what will happen next? The eventual crab population will be infected or affected. And that will eventually biomagnify and will bioaccumulate and will in a sense impact the whole of the ecosystem and the food web. So that is why it is very, very dangerous. Now, other than this, plastic pollution, mind you, has also been found in the glaciers. So that is referred to as the glacial plastic poisoning or glacial plastic pollution. Why I am listing that? Because you need to be aware of the kinds of plastic pollution that is witnessed, because UPSC can easily ask and frame a question that if this is a kind or this is a substrate where plastics are found or not. So you need to be aware, because initially and immediately the idea will be that glaciers won't have plastic, sedimentary rocks won't have plastic, igneous rocks last of all won't have plastic, but it is present in all of them. Okay, so be very clear regarding that. Then we have the concept of biorocks. If you look at the question, so mineral accretion technology often seen in the news is related to, first, rejuvenation of abandoned mines. That is incorrect. Then you have restoration of coral reefs. That is correct. Now, in order to restore the different coral reefs, there is this technology that has rather been in use across the world, for a long period of time now. So, across the world, there have been various uses of this technology to regenerate the coral population. How is it so? So, let us understand what this technique of biorock is about. And right now, why it is in news? Because Zoological Survey of India along with the Forest Department of Gujarat is trying to regenerate the coral reef population of the coast of Gujarat. So thereby, it is important for us to understand this technique, because that can be important from this year's exam perspective. So let us understand what is this and how it is done. So basically here, what you will see, as you can see here, different structures, right? These are mechanical steel structures, and through it, a very low voltage is passed. An electric current of a low voltage is passed through this structure. Now, when you have electric current passing through the steel structure, what will happen as a result? All the salts that are dissolved in the oceanic water, those salts, they start accreting themselves or accumulating themselves around that structure. And that is how around one simple structure you shall experience development of deposits And these deposits are particularly rich in calcium carbonate, or what we have as the matter from which coral polyps are made up of. Now this calcium carbonate deposit that is generated around these structures, mind you, they get harder with time. So rather than the popular perception that anything underwater or any mechanical structure underwater gets weaker with time, this biorock, they start getting stronger and harder with time. And they have very important another property, that is the property of self-healing. Mark these keywords. All these keywords that are there, they are important for biorocks. So what is this property of self-healing that we are talking about? So this property, and under this, we witness a phenomena whereby, let us suppose that you have a certain kind of steel structure. Around it, let's say, there is a coating which has developed of limestone or calcium carbonate, whatever. Now, suppose in any one of the place there is a damage to this structure, or in any one of the place the limestone coating has gone by. So in that situation, first of all, due to the shape that the structure has gained, what will happen is that limestone first of all starts depositing in the depleted portion. So thereby self-healing the structure in itself. Okay? So that is the property of biorock. Now, how does it help in rejuvenation of coral and the coral life that is there? So here, as we have said, there is deposit of calcium carbonate. Coral polyps are made up of calcium carbonate. So once you already have the deposits of calcium carbonate, the growth of the corals that are experienced, that is close to around 3 to 10 times what you observe under normal conditions. Why? Because now, once you already have the deposit of calcium, the corals no longer have to take care of generation of this calcium carbonate in order to strengthen their polyp. So that is why when you have the biorock structure which is present underwater, those biorocks, they have self-healing ability, they get stronger and harder with time, much more stronger than the original structure, as well as here you experience growth of coral which is quite faster had it been under normal circumstance. But then one question might strike you here, that suppose there is a growth of corals due to these biorocks, won't they be affected due to rising temperature? Yes, they shall be. Whenever there is a rising sea surface temperature, it will definitely impact the corals, be it anywhere. But then here the impact is slightly less because you already have such a mechanical deposit of corals or such a mechanical deposits of calcium carbonate which is generated by the virtue of electrolysis as a process due to the fact that low voltage current is passed through that steel mesh structure which leads to coral reefs. Okay, so biorocks, where is it being used in India right now, which makes it important? It is being used off the coast of Gujarat, and which is the body which is actually leading or is actually leading from the front for installing this biorock structure? That is the ZSI or the Zoological Survey of India. Okay, then after that we come to ozone depletion. Now, ozone depletion, for that matter, is quite a static terminology, quite a static topic that is thereby. But then there have been slight variations which have been found in the ozone layer where certain parts of the ozone hole, they have healed considerably. And that is why ozone layer and ozone depletion comes back to importance again. So let us first of all understand, what do we mean by ozone depletion? What do we mean when we are talking about an ozone hole? So here, be very mindful regarding one concept. When we are talking about ozone hole actually occurring in any place, we are not saying that ozone is going to be totally absent and it is going to be a physical hole that is going to be present. Rather, where we say that an ozone hole has occurred or an ozone hole exists, in those portions basically what you have is a thinning of the ozone layer. The ozone layer becomes so thin that it is no longer able to absorb or reflect the ultraviolet rays of the sun, leading to penetration of ultraviolet rays even up till the ground level. So be very clear what ozone hole is. It is not a complete absence of ozone, but rather a thinning of the ozone layer. Now, how is it generated? It is basically generated by the different gases, certain kinds of gases, not all gases, that are emitted by us and humankind from the ground level. And those gases are typical halogens, if you will say. Like you have bromides, fluorides, chlorides. These are the gases and these are the compounds which have the maximum damaging ability when it comes to the ozone layer. So where are these gases used? These gases are typically used in your refrigerants, in the normal air conditioner or the coolants, and generally as a foam for fire extinguishers, and for various and myriad purposes and uses that we employ in day-to-day life. So that is why they tend to generate, or these gases, they are referred to as CFCs or HCFCs, right? Chlorofluorocarbons or hydrochlorofluorocarbons. Out of this, hydrochlorofluorocarbons is more unstable. Chlorofluorocarbons has the presence of chlorine ions or chlorine atoms in it. Now these chlorine atoms, they tend to impact the ozone layer. How? By forming what we refer to as the photostratospheric or PSCs, photostratospheric clouds that are there, right? Or rather, PSCs, it is not photostratospheric clouds, or rather it is polar stratospheric clouds. Polar stratospheric clouds. Now, these clouds, they are formed at a particular height over the polar regions of the globe. And they are formed in those regions, the temperature is already very less. Close to around minus 70 degrees Celsius is the temperature that you expect in these regions. So, the cooler conditions in those areas, they in a way activate the chlorine and the other halogen ions which are present here. And these halogens, then they react with the ozone, which is in the form of O3, and breaks it into individual oxygen plus an oxygen ion, which actually combines with another free state oxygen ion to generate free state oxygen. So it is not as if oxygen in itself is being destroyed, but then the structure is being changed and this oxygen is not sufficient to absorb the ultraviolet rays of the sun. So that is how you have generation of the, or that is how you have the depletion of ozone layer, which is experienced world over. Now, we know that polar stratospheric clouds, they have a very low temperature that is experienced thereby. So, what does that tell us? that gives us a very important pointer again, which can be very essential from exam point of view. And that is, lower the temperature, greater will be the action by the halogens. Higher the temperature at this level, lower will be the action on the ozone layer. So unlike the popular perception that an increase in temperature will lead to more ozone depletion in the upper layers, you have the quite contrary of it holding true, that in upper layer, when the temperature is very low, in those conditions, you will have formation of polar stratospheric clouds where the temperature can dip to as low as -75 to -78 degrees Celsius, which activates the halogens in these compounds. And it is these halogens which have a significant role to play in depleting the ozone layer and in forming what are referred to as the ozone holes. Now, mind you that year 2019 and up till this year, it has been very significant for the ozone layer, and ozone layer has always remained in news. That is because now in 2019 and in the earlier part of this year, ozone layer has shown signs of healing. So be very careful that this is a fact. And here you can get confused that due to the ever-raging global warming, the ozone hole is expanding day by day. No. Ozone hole or the ozone layer has healed itself and certain holes have closed up in the previous year and in this year. Why? That is because of a phenomena that we refer to as the sudden stratospheric warming. Sudden stratospheric warming or heating which takes place, which has increased the temperature in stratosphere and which has made it detrimental for the compounds to deplete the different ozone and the different ozone layer which is present at that level. Okay? Now, regarding the ozone layer, there have been three important, or rather a couple of important conventions which are very important for us to know. First was the Vienna Convention, which was drafted way back in 1985 itself. And it set the parameters regarding how ozone can be either exploited, or rather how it is that we can preserve the ozone layer by reducing our emissions. So in those conditions, the agreement was very loosely termed. It was not even binding on everybody. So that is why under Vienna Convention, not much action and not much result was expected. But then in 1987, you had the Montreal Protocol. It is one of the most successful environmental protocols all across the world. And one of the primary reasons for the success has been the continuous amendments which have been provided. And important amendments to the Montreal Protocol are one of them, that is London and the one at Copenhagen. So both London and Copenhagen Amendment actually gave more teeth to the Montreal Agreement. Now, if the question comes, what does Montreal Agreement deal with? Does it deal with healing of, or does it deal with ozone layer itself? Does it deal with something else? Or it deals with ozone depleting substances? So Montreal Protocol, be very clear, it deals with ODS or ozone depleting substances or the different gases which end up depleting the ozone layer. And here you have the different CFCs, HCFCs and so on. Right? So initially these were thought to be very poisonous and these were thought to be very disastrous. So a new kind of gas, that is HFC, was actually prescribed for this. But then slowly, with subsequent amount of research into it, it was found that even HFC or hydrofluorocarbons, even they have ozone depleting potential in them. So now you will see different countries, they have had their own plan, that is a cooling action plan. Be it China, be it India, all of them have set their own individual targets to get rid of these HFCs as soon as possible. Now, why is it important? And what is the actual Kigali that you see in the screen? So, Montreal Protocol was important in curbing the use of CFCs and HCFCs and other ODS. But then Montreal Protocol did not fix an end date to it. So that is why in 2016 you had rather the Kigali Amendment to it. Kigali is in Rwanda. So you had the Kigali Amendment to it. When did it come into force? It came into force in 2019. Okay? And hereby you have targets depending upon the country that is there and the stage of development that the country is in. So for India, the target has been set up till 2048 that is there. For certain OECD countries, the target is immediately up till 2025. So that is how, dependent upon the developmental stage of the country, you had the targets and a realistic target that is there, that has been set. That is something which has been given due to the Kigali Amendment of the Montreal Protocol. So when it comes to ozone layer, when it comes to ozone depletion, you need to know the Vienna, Montreal and the Kigali Agreement, and thereby you need to know what is the importance of it. And first of all, and the basic of it, you need to know that even HFCs, which were earlier flouted and earlier it was shown off as one of the novel gases that are there, which do not have much impact on the climate, much impact on the ozone layer. Even HFCs, as per NASA's studies, have been found to be dangerous for the ozone layer. Okay? Now, the question with reference to the ozone layer, consider the following statements. The first, an increased warming of the stratosphere reduces the rate of depletion of the ozone layer. So, even though the normal logic will say that increased warming will increase the ozone hole, no. This is correct, that increased warming of stratosphere reduces the rate of depletion of ozone layer. Then, despite the increased level of global warming, the ozone hole observed during 2019 was at its minimum. When was it? It was in the months of September up till November. The ozone hole was at its minimum. And now the ozone hole which was present over the Arctic, that has also basically closed up. So that is how you have these two statements, both of them being correct. The answer will be 1 and 2. Okay? Then, which of the following is or are examples of short-lived climate pollutants or SLCP? Now, what are short-lived climate pollutants? How do we measure which is long-lived, which is short-lived? So, as is the case generally when it comes to pollution, carbon dioxide is the marker through which and according to which we have the general measurement taking place. So, carbon dioxide that is there, or CO2, it takes roughly around 100 years if released to finally get dissipated or finally breaking itself down. So, any kind of pollutant, when it is having a lesser lifespan in the environment when compared to CO2, it is referred to as, in general parlance, as short-lived climate pollutant. It is pollutant nonetheless. It is not going to be beneficial, but then it is going to be present in the environment only for a short duration. Okay? So, which of them are actually SLCPs or short-lived climate pollutants? First is black carbon. Black carbon has a life cycle of around 12 to 20 days. So yes, it will be a short-lived. Ozone, that is there, even ozone has a much shorter life period as compared to carbon dioxide. So yes, both of them will be SLCP. Carbon dioxide, as we have mentioned, it has a lifespan of around 100 years. Right? Then you have methane. Now, methane, on the namesake of it, is one of the most important greenhouse gases. And they have a very different consequence on the global warming because they end up increasing the rate of global warming. But then if you consider the life cycle of it, it is only around 12 years. So again, it will also be an SLCP. Then you have sulfur hexafluoride and PFCs. Both of them, if you will observe, they have halogens present in it or halogens present in it. They are a kind of ODS or ozone depleting substance, and typically they have a lifespan in thousands of years. For example, sulfur hexafluoride can stay in the atmosphere for approximately 3,200 years. So think about it. That is the magnitude of their pollution. So both of them will not be there. Perfluorocarbons, they have even more amount of presence and a larger lifespan than the SF6 that is there. So 5 and 6 won't be there. So the answer will be 1, 2 and 4. Black carbon, tropospheric ozone, and then you have methane. Now, in this, another thing that you can extract from here, and that is regarding methane. Now, one of the chief sources of methane generation is basically the livestock population. So that is why countries such as New Zealand, which have typically been an exporter of animal products and processed animal food, they are facing difficulty in curbing down the methane propagation and the methane actually going out into the atmosphere. So keep this in mind that animals are one of the chief sources when it comes to methane. And methane is a very dangerous greenhouse gas which increases the rate of global warming that is there. Okay? Now, chlorofluorocarbons, known as ozone depleting substances, are used in which of these? So, in packaging materials, yes. Sometimes you have the use of CFCs in generation of styrofoams in themselves. Then in blowing agents in foam manufacturing, absolutely yes. That is why you have them being used sometimes even as fire retardants, so as to have a much better foam which is generated. So in this as well, in cleaning certain electronic components as refrigerants. So you have CFCs which can be used in all of these. So do not go searching for where CFCs are. Go through this question. That shall be sufficient, and that shall be sufficient from the exam perspective as well. Okay? Then, after that, we come to the terminology of Arctic amplification. Now, this has been in constant news in recent period of time. Now, what is this Arctic amplification all about? So, Arctic amplification is nothing but rather the doubling of warming of the Arctic environment and the Arctic climate which takes place. And this has been happening for quite some time now. that even though the global temperature is rising, the rate of rise of Arctic temperature is twice that. So that is why we need to know what Arctic amplification is and why is it happening. So one of the reasons for this happening is again what we discussed yesterday under urban heat island, that is the factor of albedo. Right? How is albedo responsible for increasing Arctic temperature? Because of a cyclic process that is undertaken. That is, first of all, what happens is, due to increased temperature, what happens is that some part of ice melts. Right? Now the melted portion absorbs more, reflects less, thereby increasing the overall temperature again. And when the temperature will increase, what will happen? More ice will melt. More ice will melt will mean what? More heat will be absorbed, again temperature will rise. So this is a vicious cycle that Arctic has fallen into, which we refer to as Arctic amplification. Also, due to climate change and due to increased global warming, there are more storms and uneven storms, sudden storms which happen, which tend to transfer the heat from the equatorial regions to the colder areas above. So that is also one of the reasons why Arctic amplification is taking place. Okay? Now, which of the following statements aptly describes the phenomena of Arctic amplification? The first statement: increase in the surface temperature over the Arctic at more than double the global average. That will be the answer, and be sure that it is almost double the global average, which refers to Arctic amplification. You do not need to study anything else about it. Okay? Then, after that, we have the Mosaic expedition. So Mosaic expedition is again related to the Arctic, because if you look at it recently, Mosaic expedition, often seen in the news, refers to what? This is the kind of question that you will face here. There is another kind of question that can be expected from it. We'll talk about it. So here the first option is lunar exploration program launched by NASA. All robot circumnavigation expedition, no. And then you have exploration of Arctic climate action. So this is the right answer. So what is the Mosaic expedition about? Mosaic expedition is rather a host or multidisciplinary experimental phase or multidisciplinary experiment which is being undertaken with the pioneering help of Alfred Wegener Institute of Germany, which is ensuring that all throughout the year, with the help of newer machineries, that is, now you have the different ice-breaking ships, icebreakers as they are called, which can virtually go right up till the North Pole. So with that, they actually aim or aspire to spend one complete year studying the climatic phenomena in North Pole and studying everything: underwater current movement that is there, atmospheric circulation that is there, everything, and so that we get a better idea, better understanding of what the Arctic climate is going to look like in the coming days as well. Okay, so that is what Mosaic expedition is. Now I said there can be another type of question framed from this, and that type of question is, who is leading this? You can expect different types of options like World Meteorological Organization, you can expect Indian Meteorological Department and even NASA, and you can get confused by it. But remember this, it is being led by Alfred Wegener Institute of Germany. Right? UPSC had asked a direct question regarding Alfred Wegener. few years back. So remember, Alfred Wegener was the one who gave the theory of continental drift, based upon which now you have the theory of plate tectonics as well. Okay, so these are important when it comes to Arctic and the climate change observed in the Arctic. Now, another thing, this is more about the subcontinent now. Consider the following pairs regarding the initiatives that have been launched and the purpose behind it. So the first is green good deeds, and that is promoting green social responsibility. So this is correct. What are green good deeds? Green good deeds have been launched in our country in order to ensure much more adherence and rather much more affluence to environmental laws, ensuring a harmony when it comes to maintaining the green cover, as well as ensuring that different etiquettes like not honking, saving water, planting green trees, that is something which penetrates and perpetuates into the last citizen, so that if the citizenry is aware, then there can be no stopping to the conservation of environment as a whole project. So green good deeds is about promoting green social responsibility, not corporate social responsibility, social responsibility, responsibility of the society as a whole. So this is correct. Then you have hashtag I commit and climate resilience in South Asian countries. This is incorrectly matched. Hashtag I commit is a program launched by Ministry of Power and Non-Renewable Energy. Okay, Ministry of Power and New and Non-Renewable Energy, that is the new name of the ministry, that has launched the hashtag I commit program, whereby energy resilience, and in order to ensure that energy is utilized in a better manner so as to dovetail all the different government schemes together with an aim of protecting the environment, making the environment a better place to live in. That is what the I Commit program is about. So here you have to remember the ministry who has launched it, and you have to remember that different schemes under Government of India, be it the FAME scheme that you have, be it the scheme regarding the Saubhagya scheme that you have, all the different schemes that are in a way going to save or ensure judicious use of energy, that is included under the ambit of hashtag I commit. Okay, which is the agency which is at the pioneering head of it, that is EESL, right? EESL is the pioneering agency, or the agency under whose aegis everything is taking place. Then you have CARE. CARE is about climate resilience in South Asian countries, which is being funded by the World Bank in itself to ensure climate and environmental conservation and mitigating the challenges which are imposed by climate change in South Asian countries. So here you have one only as the appropriate answer. Then there are certain few other initiatives that are again very important from the exam perspective. Just go through it or flip through it in a very brief manner so that you are aware of what these initiatives are, so that you can attempt any question regarding these initiatives. First is 1 trillion tree initiative. So in this you need to know the organization who is responsible for it. Okay, and it has been done in order to support UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, which is, when is this decade going to be observed? Between 2021 to 2030. So thereby the initiative to plant 1 trillion trees is being launched by World Economic Forum. Be aware of it so that you don't mark UNEP in the answer. Then you have zero carbon law passed by New Zealand in order to limit the greenhouse gas emissions to zero by around 2050. But then New Zealand faces one problem, that is the animals and the livestock that it uses for food processing, also for exports. They are, as we discussed already, they are the chief producers and chief emitters of methane, which is again a greenhouse gas. So zero carbon law has recently been passed by New Zealand, and then you have a Green Deal which has been reached by the European Union to achieve climate neutrality by the year 2050. Okay, so just remember the agencies and the names of the countries who are involved and the target that is there and the name of the campaign. Okay, that is important from exam perspective. Now, another kind that you get is, what is anthropos? So, the term anthropos, recently seen in the news, can be best described as what? So you can expect a question from terminologies like this. So, first is the reduction in anthropogenic carbon emission due to various climate-related activities. No. Then you have the extinction of various species at a faster rate due to human activities. Again, no. Why would it be referred to as anthropos in that case? Then halting the species extinction through various global initiatives. Again, no. Then you have a considerable global slowing of modern human activities due to the lockdown that has been imposed. So this is what anthropos is. And due to this lockdown that has been imposed, there has also been a considerable drop in the seismic noise across the globe by the matter of around 30 to 50%. So be mindful of that as well. Then after that we have the terminology coccolithophores. Again, a very weird terminology, but one of those which has been in news in this past year, and you can expect easily a question regarding this. So what are coccolithophores? So first statement is, they are microscopic single-celled marine algae. Very true. They are helpful in increasing the primary productivity of the ocean. Yes, they can. They are algae after all. Algae are nothing but microscopic plants that are there. So yes. Then they are also helpful in absorbing carbon dioxide from the ocean ecosystem. Yes. Why? They are algae. They undergo photosynthesis. And these algae are important because they end up utilizing, again, CaCO3, calcium. Right? And they also help in, to some degree, very small degree, to ensure carbon sequestration, which happens or which continues to happen at a favorable place in the ocean. So recently, an Indian team which was researching the southern part of Indian Ocean, they came across this particular algae, and that is why this algae has been in news, and it is very probable that you can expect a question from this. So don't, again I will reiterate, don't go searching for the material, just follow what this question, and you will get the idea about any type of question that can be framed from here. Okay, so that shall be all for the topics that we had to cover today. In the next class that we have, and in the next lecture that we convene on, which shall be on 23rd of September, we shall be discussing about certain species which are in news, like you have the great Indian bustard, the red panda, the snow leopard, as well as we shall be looking at the few protected areas, including important national parks and wildlife sanctuaries which have remained in news for the past year. So if you take a total look at all these 4 lectures, that shall ensure your comprehensive revision and will ensure that you fetch maximum amount of returns to the time that you have spent here, and that will easily help you score big when it comes to environment and ecology. Okay? So that shall be all for today's class. Please like the video if it did help you, and please comment regarding the video that you saw, and please press the bell icon in order to get notified when the next video is being uploaded or when the next session is going to be held. That shall be for your benefit. Okay? So that shall be all for today. Take care, thank you, and have a wonderful good night.